Hello everyone and welcome to the catch-all for the week of March 11th to March 18th of 2017. This week we have a bunch of fun little stories, but as always this show is hosted by myself, Josh Silverman, with stories written by Ryan Furster and Tom Stapley. And actually, we don't even have just gaming stuff this week, we've got something that's kind of film related, and by kind of film related, I mean completely film related. Stick around for that, and by stick around I mean it's like the first, it's where we're starting. So, into that. Taking pills from strangers, strange chat room revelations, waking up naked covered in goo, unsure of where or when you are? These aren't just things we at Constant Calibrating experience on a regular basis, but important plot points from the Wachowskis' 1999 sci-fi classic, The Matrix. The Hollywood Reporter has, well, reported that the almost 20-year-old film is getting the good old reboot treatment. Par for the course, the Wachowskis' original writers and directors for the Matrix film trilogy so far have nothing to do with the project. Not even a blessing. Joel Silver, producer for the original trilogy, was the one who approached Warner Brothers about the project, despite rumored strained relationships with the Wachowskis. Now you may be saying, "What, dearest narrator? How could anyone ever try to reboot such a beloved iconic franchise?" And first off, we commend you on your spot on Cockney accent. Yeah, Brian, I can't do a Cockney accent. Why would you write that in there? We've seen reboots of classics like RoboCop, Total Recall, and Judge Dredd, and all left a foul Nintendo Switch cartridge licking taste in our mouths. But dear listener, there is a shiny ray of hope. The new movie's writer, Zach Penn of The Avengers and Last Action Hero fame, has provided us some comfort saying this isn't actually going to be a reboot. It'll be more akin to a continuation or expansion of the universe and not a remaking of the original. More stories in an established universe rather than taking the chance of screwing up and restarting an established universe? This is probably for the best, seeing as how it'd be difficult to bend backwards and dodge that bullet. Next up, Zelda Breath of the Wild player X Fate Awaits X recently accomplished the great feat of being the first player to collect all 900 Karak Seeds, and was able to receive his final rewards from Hetsu. Guess what the reward was? We'll give you a hint. It was shit! No, like really shit. Like, from your butt. Maybe it's subtle commentary on the pointless sense of accomplishment a lot of platformers give you for collecting meaningless virtual doodads. Maybe future DLC will offer up an outhouse-based dungeon for which this is the key? Maybe some overworked developer grew tired of getting shit about the game and wanted to give shit instead. Whatever the reason, this straight-edged monikered player can drop the 2 X's because they probably need a drink after all this shit. And just for anyone wondering, Brad, who hosts the Constant Calibrating podcast, which, by the way, live every Monday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/constantcalibrating. Anyways, he is fucking furious about this. I don't think I've ever seen Brad this angry about anything. Tune into the podcast. I'm going to give him so much shit for it. It'll be the end of our relationship as we know it. Speaking of Breath of the Wild, with most consoles there are emulators that allow you to play all the prized gems of console exclusives on your PC, and in this case the Nintendo Switch is not an exception. Popular Wii U emulator Cemu, which is CEMU, because I have no idea how to pronounce that, has been shown able to run Breath of the Wild, albeit not very well, barely maintaining 15 frames per second at 4K as well as the native 720p. Taking all of this into account, it actually is pretty impressive for a game that only came out 2 weeks ago. This doesn't mean it'll be running at 60 frames per second anytime soon. The developer of this emulator, a Reddit user by the name of XFAP, stated, "There is the common misconception that because the game runs so well already, it will run perfectly equally soon." But this small breakthrough has boosted the Cemu Patreon from $5,900, which is from before the news of this emulation came out, to well over $11,000 per month. Obviously, some people are eager to see the results. I'm not. I don't need to play Breath of the Wild. Nuh-uh. I don't need that in my life. That lie brought to you by Tom Stapley, just to be clear. I've played the shit out of Breath of the Wild. You've seen me with playing it during recordings. This might be too many cutaways. Finishing off our show, we're going to take a look at a couple of ongoing Kickstarter campaigns. First off, we have Anew the Distant Light from Resonator. Last month on the podcast, we brought you info on the start of the Anew Kickstarter campaign, and as of right now, we're happy to say they've exceeded their $30,000 goal with hours to spare. And we do mean hours, as the campaign ends Sunday night, so like within 36 hours or less of when this should be releasing. Inspired by games like Metroid, Cave Story, and Dark Souls, Anew is a beautiful game that hopes to expand on the platforming puzzle genre that many of us grew up on. The $35,000 stretch goal will open them to adding more components to the game, including research into bringing it to the Nintendo Switch as soon as possible. Having played an early build of the game at Phoenix Comic Con last year, I can say without a doubt that this is one of my more anticipated indie titles. On the other end of the Kickstarter sphere, we have the recently started Kickstarter for Mages of Mystralia from Borealis Games. Mages of Mystralia launched to Kickstarter on Thursday with a goal of just under $19,000, but has already surpassed that by over 10 grand. The game is taking the opposite standard approach to Kickstarter, having already secured funding and being in a more or less completed state. You can read their Why Such a Modest Goal section of their campaign for a full explanation, but to summarize, they observed playtesters and realized they were not terribly difficult to add aspects for the game that would take it to another level. But that would take time and money, and their Kickstarter as it stands now would function to fund that. Mages was a lot of fun to play at PAX West last year, becoming one of my personal favorite games of the show. The ability to create spells and unique ways to defeat enemies and puzzles based on your own creativity and not the limitations of the game or the game developers itself is something rarely seen in games these days, at least prior to Breath of the Wild. Which makes sense since the game is seen by many as Zelda meets Harry Potter, which is kind of a dream game for me if I do say so myself. Now, who do I talk to about getting this game on the Switch? Dan, you had like some ties to Nintendo or something, right? Right? That is the catch-all for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember, the catch-all can be found every Saturday, most of the time, on youtube.com/concalpod. And additionally, just make sure you check out those Kickstarters if the games seem interesting, because even though they're funded, the more money they get, the better kind of thing we might get out of that. And I would love to do some Let's Plays and review stuff for these titles. So that being said, I bid you a good sign off. I got nothing. You want something like crazy like last time?